kind of starting from the beginning, what led you to start writing music and performing?
Um, I guess, well, I started playing guitar, like electric guitar, when I was maybe 9 years old, 8 or 9, and then that kind of segued into writing, like songwriting. I was really interested in being, as like a kid around that time, I was really interested in being like a novelist. So I would write like a ton of stories and short stories and stuff like that. And then I just kind of eventually ended up combining like the writing passion and the guitar playing passion. And that's kind of when I got into writing.
You study songwriting in school currently, right?
I study at Belmont University in Nashville. And then yeah, I study songwriting with a minor in music business.
What was that like for you, sort of getting to explore that while you were studying?
It's definitely been interesting. I think it's forced me to expand in a way I didn't expect to because I think the songwriting program at Belmont in particular is very commercialized and intended for people that want to do like pop or country or like radio music or write for other people, which makes sense in like a course curriculum because like what else would they teach? But it's definitely interesting because it's forced me to like do co-writes and write songs in like genres that I wouldn't normally write in, which at times has felt really difficult, but also at times has felt like super exciting and it's like been cool to expand in that way.
Right. Has living in Nashville shaped some of your love for music too?
Yeah, it definitely has. I think the Nashville music scene is just so community oriented. And I think it's been cool being in a place where people are genuinely excited about music and interested in artists, and especially like smaller independent artists. People are really excited about the local talent and the local art here, which has been super exciting.
Does your writing in particular feel like it's inspired by specific emotions or events? Like, where does it start for you when you're writing a song?
Usually it starts from like one lyric. I keep like a list of like just random lyrics I think of in my phone. So usually when I sit down to write, I'll kind of like go through those and see if anything resonates with me from like whatever I'm feeling in that moment. So usually it just comes from like one very small place. And then a lot of times it ends up being storytelling. And then it's like looking back, I'm like, oh, I kind of see what this is about. But it's rare that I sit down and I'm like, I'm going to write about this specific event. And then I like write about that. It usually comes from somewhere a little more ambiguous.
Right, that makes sense. Is there anything that led you to sort of gravitate towards indie rock and the sound that you have currently?
I think just the music I listened to and the music that was really inspiring me started to change. I think I found a lot of music that really excited me and I just ended up kind of like naturally emulating those techniques and that style.
What was it like for you for the first time putting your music out into the world and allowing it to be heard by other people?
Um, Geez, I'm trying to think if I like felt anything crazy. I think I was excited. I think I've always like felt like what I'm doing is what I'm going to do. So I don't think like I never really had like I it always just felt like part of the plan, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like but I was definitely excited about it and probably a little nervous because the first time I put out music like into the world, I was like 14, so I'm trying to remember like what my
Oh, wow.
14-year-old self was feeling. But then with like the stuff I started putting out in college, like a bit more seriously, um, I remember just being excited and a little terrified, but just trying my best to like detach from the results and just know that I was kind of doing the right thing. It was definitely a lot of just excitement and like kind of that jittery, anxious feeling, but in a good way.
Yeah. What was your creative process with making your first single that you put out in college now that you had a little bit of experience of studying it too?
Yeah. Well, it was definitely different for me because I'd never really been like as heavily involved in the process of recording my own music. So I think it was cool to just kind of like maybe have that creative freedom and try new things out and kind of figure out like what I wanted my sound to be and what I wanted it to be inspired by, which is like obviously just an ongoing process, like that always changes. But I think that was super exciting. Um, and I think in regards to the songwriting curriculum, um, I don't know that anything I was learning in my classes at the time felt super relevant, but I definitely met a lot of people from doing like the songwriting and the music business that ended up being like good friends or collaborators, which was awesome.
That's really cool. What would you say was your most challenging single to make? Like, which process stuck out to you as difficult but rewarding?
Definitely Shrapnel, my like most recent single. That one, just recording vocals for it took forever for like no, I mean, not for no reason. It's like it's a difficult song to sing, and I'm also very particular about how I like my vocals processed and how I like them to sound. So it was just a huge struggle trying to get those vocals done, and then we ended up going back and changing some things instrumentally. And so that song, I wrote it maybe like March of last year, and it took almost like a year to really get completely finished. Like, and we were working kind of inconsistently on that song also, but yeah, it took about a year to finish, which is sort of crazy. But that song was definitely the most difficult song to get done. But once we nailed it and I like had the final mix back and the master back, I was so happy with it and it felt really, really good.
What came first for you with making Shrapnel? Was it the lyrics, the sound? Like, what stuck with you first?
I think the chords stuck with me first, like the guitar part, um, because I usually write in open tunings, and this was one of the first songs I had written in a while that was just in standard. And so I remember those like chord changes definitely standing out to me, and that was kind of where it started from. And then I think writing the whole song took like 20 minutes. I was in like my freshman year dorm room, and it just kind of like I don't know. Sometimes you just have those like creative outbursts where it just comes to you. And that was one of those songs. And at first, I actually didn't really like it. Like I was like, I don't love this. But then I went to like get a second opinion from a friend, and he was like, "Whoa, like this is awesome and amazing and all things good." And I was like, "Cool." And then from there, it was kind of just building it up from like the bones that it was at the time.
It's my favorite song of yours. It's awesome.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That's really sweet. Yeah, I've been very like pleasantly surprised at the response to it, especially for a song that I was like so kind of unsure of at the beginning. So that's
Yeah,
really sweet of you. Thank you.
of course. What feeling would you say your music best captures?
Um, I think maybe the word that comes to mind immediately is reminiscent. I think a lot of the songs I write feel really reflective, and I think I definitely use songwriting to dissect like things that happened to me or emotions that I wasn't able to address like in the present moment at the time, if that makes sense.
It
So I think
does.
a lot of my music feels like really like reminiscent of a time or a feeling or I don't know, just something I felt at a certain point in time. And I think I'm like in the middle of starting to roll out my debut EP, and I think that project especially feels really reminiscent and really captures like a lot of what the past couple years have been for me in terms of just like emotional growth and experiences.
What has it been like for you compiling that EP as like, your longest body of work?
It's been daunting for sure. I definitely felt a lot of pressure to make it like the best thing ever because I feel like when an artist puts out their first body of work, it's like the first thing substantial enough to like receive critique. Like I think it's a little more indicative of like where my artist project is going and like what I want my sound to be. So that has been kind of terrifying to me, but it's also been really exciting because I feel good about the music and I feel like all of it is really some of my most like authentic and honest writing coming from like real experiences and emotions. And I wasn't like for all of these songs, I wasn't really like trying to make them a certain way or make them like, I don't know, digestible in any sort of way. And so it definitely feels authentic and true to like the time where I am or have been in like the past year or so. Um, which feels good. And I hope it's received well, but I also know that like this isn't like I've been trying to make peace with the fact that this isn't like the last thing I'm ever gonna put out and it doesn't have to be perfect and art is like constantly subject to change. So but yeah, I mostly feel now like really excited and kind of curious to see what happens.
Well, I can't wait to listen. I'm sure it'll be
Thank
amazing.
you. I
You're,
appreciate it.
you're welcome. Were there any artists that inspired your new musical direction?
Yeah, definitely. I think Wednesday has been one of the bands that's been inspiring me the most recently. Their most recent album, Rat Saw God, I think like literally it was like the first album I'd heard in so long that I could just listen to front to back, front to back, front to back, like over and over again. And I love that album so much. And so that and the way they use sound definitely inspired me a lot going into this EP. And then so I feel like that's been the biggest one. Big Thief has also been inspiring me a lot recently, and Adrian Lenker. They're great. And I think both of those bands do a good job at combining like folk elements and then kind of like rock elements too. Which is really awesome because that's always something I really wanted to do, but I didn't like have the influences. Like I didn't know about these bands until kind of recently. And now like I can kind of look up to them, which is awesome. But I would say, yeah, Big Thief and Wednesday are probably the two that I feel like have directly inspired this EP the most. And then like the Districts, Indigo D'Souza, and like a few other indie rock ish acts, I think.
Nice. So would you say that your music is headed in a heavier direction or more rock inspired direction?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I feel like I've been super inspired by like rock music and especially female fronted rock music recently. Um, so I definitely think it'll probably keep going down that path.
Nice. There's a lot of vulnerability in your music, specifically lyrically. How does it feel to have listeners listen to that and put yourself out there in that way?
Um, I don't know that I've ever like thought that much into it, which sounds kind of ridiculous. Um, I think I think sometimes it's felt maybe a little uncomfortable to be that vulnerable, but I think I know that like I don't think that the way that I feel is ever unique to me. Like I think other people experience everything or like have experienced all of the emotions that I've experienced and that I talk about and stuff. So I think it doesn't feel as scary because I know that it's not like that I'm not like a freak of nature for like feeling the way I feel or like saying the things that I say. Um but yeah, it definitely can be scary at times, but I think there's also definitely a level of comfort in being that vulnerable and being like that honest with a group of people.
No, I think it's great that you don't even worry about it. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I say that now, but there's definitely moments where I'm like, oh, this is so weird, especially when I'm playing shows and like if my parents are there, I'm like, you
Yeah,
don't need to be hearing all of this.
that's fair. So you mentioned in an article with Atwood that you like to make music that you can scream with the windows down. What's your current driving playlist?
Oh, geez. Okay. I'm trying to think of like what I've been loving recently. Well, Feeble Little Horse, their whole record, Girl with Fish, and actually Heyday, they have two records out. I've been listening to their music a ton recently. Like I've been just loving, I'll like listen to their album front to back, like all the time. So I've been loving them and I've been listening to their music a lot. Um, I've been listening to the Districts. I'm trying to think of like who else I've been listening to. Let me actually, I have a playlist. I can pull her up.
Okay.
Um, I've been listening to, oh, I've been listening to Big Star a lot recently too. I just kind of got into them, even though I know they're a bit of an older band. Pine Grove for obvious reasons. And then I've also been listening to these two smaller bands like a lot that my friend Davis told me about, called Launder and Ben Stellar. And Ben Stellar, they have an EP out that's like another one of my like favorite EPs that I've heard in a while. They're like a smaller, like maybe indie rock, garage rock sort of band out of New York. And they're like pretty small, but they're signed to Dirty Hit. And so they're doing all these like huge tours, but they just have this like EP out and it's awesome. So I've been loving them too. Um, but yeah, lots of good music this summer.
Nice, I'll have to check them out. You recently played some shows in New York City. What was that like for you getting to go to the city and play those shows?
It was really, really fun. I mean, it was crazy because it was my first time ever traveling for a show or like playing a show that wasn't in the place where I was living. So it was really exciting. I was really nervous because I didn't know really anyone that was going to be there other than like the handful of friends that I have in New York City. And I like didn't really know what it was going to be like, but the crowd was really, really kind and people were really receptive and attentive and like curious about the music, which I really appreciated because it's always like hit or miss. I feel like playing shows if people are gonna just like talk over your set or like actually are there to like hear the music. And
Yeah,
I got lucky where it was a situation where the people that were there were obviously like there to enjoy the music and super intentional about like being present. So that felt really good and I felt good about the set, which was awesome. Yeah, and New York City's great. I mean, it was just super cool to get to like actually hang out there because I'd never spent really much time there.
that's awesome. I think openers in a lot of ways expose people to new music and it can be an awesome experience. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Does performing bring a new outlook to the songs for you? Like, what did you enjoy most about it?
Um, Performing, I think, is where I probably have the most fun because I think there's just like it's way less rigid and there's as opposed to the recording process where obviously you're trying to like get it perfect. But there's just so much up in the air and you get to kind of interact with the crowd. And when I play with my band, I get to interact with my friends like on stage. And so that's always really exciting. And just like getting to experience music like in a room full of people and everyone's energy just feels kind of like so present. It's really, really fun. I feel like shows are just like a lot of fun.
Nice. What would you say you've learned about yourself as an artist with both the new music and performing?
Um, Geez, I mean, I think what I've learned about myself is that it's okay to not have it all, or I don't know if this is really about myself, but I think the main thing I've learned probably in the past year or so is that it's okay to not have it all figured out. And like it's okay to like not be perfect all the time. And that it's like always an ongoing and like ever evolving process and that's okay and that's actually like largely the fun of it is getting just inspired by new things or messing up and correcting it or figuring out what works and what doesn't, and that like the in between is just as exciting and fruitful as like the end result, if that makes sense.
That does. Do you have any favorite venues that you've played or memories from shows that have stuck with you?
Well, Baby's All Right in New York was really, really awesome. I know that's like an iconic New York venue, so that was super exciting. And then I'm trying to think of venues in Nashville that I've really enjoyed. The East Room is like a local venue here that a lot of my friends play at and that I've played at a few times, and that's a cool venue. I'm playing a show at the End tomorrow. I'm playing a show at the End, which is like another kind of local venue in Nashville, which is it's like cool. It's nice they let like younger artists and like independent artists come and play. I really appreciate venues like that around here. Um, yeah, I would say those are probably a few of the favorites. Oh, and then Songbird in DC. I played at like a couple summers ago, and that was really fun too. That's a cool venue.
That's sick. Do you have any dream artists that you would like to collaborate with in the future?
Wow. I think Wednesday would probably be number one. I love, I mean, I would not even like, I don't even know that I'd want to collaborate with them because I just think they're so cool. I would love to just like maybe open a tour for them or something, or like hang out with them or watch them record and just kind of like see what they do. But I feel like that's like the band I would love to spend some time with probably. And then I guess like if I was to like write or like actually collaborate with anyone, I don't know. That's tough. Maybe Indigo D'Souza. I like love her stuff. I feel like maybe we could do something cool. I don't know.
That would be cool. Do you have any advice for anybody who wants to start doing music or writing music and isn't really sure where to start?
Yeah, I would say, geez. I mean, my advice would be to probably be kind to yourself and accept that it's gonna take a long time and it's gonna like even now, like most of the songs I write are like really awful and I would never want anyone to listen to them. Like it takes time, it takes repetition, it um and just be kind to yourself and be okay with like where you are and kind of that process and recognize that it's going to be imperfect and that that's okay. And the important thing is just kind of keep trying and like seeking vulnerability in yourself and your writing. I think is really important.
Thank you. I have one more question. So, my show revolves around poetry and music and kind of bringing that together. Do you have any poetry or book recommendations for anybody listening?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I do. I was actually just talking about a friend with this yesterday. Um, I read Crush by Richard Seikin really recently, and I loved that book. It's like I had been hunting for it for like probably a year, and then I found it at McKay's, which is like a thrift bookstore near here. I found it there for like 99 cents and I got it and I love that book a lot. I think Richard Seikin is a great, like a devastatingly good writer. It's definitely like kind of like it'll probably make you cry if you read it. It definitely made me cry a lot. But that's a really good poetry book that I've been inspired by and liking a lot recently.
Nice. I'll have to check that out. Finding good books at the thrift is always a win.
Yeah, it really always is.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this interview. It was great to get to talk with you. I absolutely love your music.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you for having me.